Hey everybody, welcome to Explorations. My name is Rob. Today we are taking a look at these bad boys right here. These are the Trailmax Mission tires by Dunlop. So these are the tires that took me and my Gen 2 KLR 650 to the Arctic Ocean and back. It was a 16,000 kilometer trip, 2,000 kilometers of which were gravel and soft gravel. I've also had these on lots of highways, lots of trails. I have a pretty good experience on them. So we're gonna do an overview of these tires. We're gonna do my review, look at the pros and the cons. It's going to be great. So these are the Trailmax Missions by Dunlop. They are 60/40 tires. These tires are tubeless, but they can be run with a tube, which is what I'm doing here. If you take a look at the tread pattern, you can see it has nice deep grooves, good for moving water out of the way when you're riding on wet pavement. And you can see that they also have these relatively aggressive chunky knobs. They're in a bit of a staggered pattern, so there's still lots of surface in contact with the asphalt while you're riding, but it does give you a lot of off-road grip as well. This particular set is 2 years old, and as I said, we took it to the Arctic Ocean and back, and I've got a few thousand more kilometers on it since then. So we're getting close to 20,000 kilometers on the set, and as you can see, they're still in excellent shape. There is a little bit of cracking along the sidewall, starting to show their age a little bit. So you can see they're starting to flatten out on top here, which is a sign that these ones need to be changed. But as you can see, there is still a decent amount of tread left on these tires, despite the fact that they've ridden so far. So I found these tires have excellent performance on asphalt, both wet and dry asphalt. Even on a cold day like today, it's mid-November, it's just a little bit above zero, I think it's like 4 degrees or so. They still held up well on the asphalt. They're still gripping. I didn't feel any sort of slip. I'm still confident riding and leaning into those corners, despite the fact that it's cold, the asphalt's cold, the rubber's a little stiffer. Even though they have relatively aggressive knobs, there's very little vibration. Compared to tires like the OEM tires, which are a little knobbier, there is more vibration with those tires than you get with this. As I mentioned, we have ridden on the Dempster Highway and the Inuvik Highway, which are rough gravel and soft gravel roads, would be the best way to describe that. And that was, I think, 1,800 kilometers with both those highways combined. So again, lots of experience on gravel on these, and I didn't find any real issues. They seemed to grip fine. They didn't tend to roll around. I had a little bit of issues in the softer gravel at higher speeds, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but yeah, I thought they handled admirably in gravel. I've also had these on like single track trails. We've ridden up mountains in them. I've ridden through mud on them, and yeah, you know, they handled well. Not as good as a more aggressive off-road oriented tire probably, but I didn't have any problems with them. I felt confident in all the situations. They did bog down a little bit in the mud pits and in deeper mud, and again, a knobbier tire would probably be a better option for that, but in terms of like an all-around tire, these did quite well. Unfortunately, I haven't ridden them enough in sand or on grass to confidently comment on their performance there, but for asphalt and for gravel roads and for gravel single track and dirt single track, I was quite happy with the performance of these. So why don't we talk about the pros and the cons of these? Starting with the pros, the first big pro is longevity. As I said, they have almost 20,000 kilometers on them, which is a decent amount of mileage for any tire. And you can see they've held up relatively well. I mean, you can still see the seam from the mold. There's still lots of tread life, except for maybe on the top where they're starting to get a little bit flat. But overall, they held up well despite all of that mileage behind them. And a lot of that mileage, as I said, was on rough gravel roads. So they definitely took a beating, and they definitely stood up to that. My next pro is they're low vibration. I've had tires with equivalent knobs, I'd say, on them, if that's a word, that you definitely feel more vibration on riding on asphalt. These ones, despite how knobby they are, for an all-around tire. There's very little to even, I would say, no vibration. So they're very comfortable ride, very smooth. And the final pro is, as I've said a couple times, they're versatile. I mean, they handle well on asphalt, they handle well on gravel, rock, extremely well. We took them up mountains in Whitehorse, like those were difficult trails, and they gripped and held, and they got us up there no problem. And I've been riding a lot of single track here around southern Ontario where it's dirt and mud, and these are good enough to get you through that. If you're going to be doing that more, maybe a different style tire might be more per alley, but in terms of an all-around tire, which seems to handle most things pretty well and some things very well, these are definitely up there. So let's talk about the first, I don't even want to call it a con, it's more of a drawback in my opinion. Some people will look at it as a pro, and it is probably a pro in some situations, but that is the stiff rubber. Dunlop is known to have stiff rubber in general, stiffer rubber in their tires, and the fact that these are basically tubeless tires that I'm running with a tube in them, the rubber is even stiffer again. So, I mean, that's not necessarily a really bad thing. In theory, it should make the tire more resilient, but for me, I'm listing this as a con because it is so hard to get these things off the rim and back on the rim if you have to do like a flat tire change and you're just out and about. I prefer to have the peace of mind knowing that I can easily swap out a tire if I have to, especially if I'm in a remote location. I want to be able to do that. These are extremely difficult, and I spoke to my local bike shop. I spoke to the guy there, and he said he even has trouble getting them on and off rims with the machine. So imagine being stuck on a trail and having to get these things off with bead breakers and spoons. We tried it in Whitehorse, and holy cow, it is very difficult. So I am going to list that as a con, but again, I mean, if you're someone who's extremely good at changing tires, has lots of experience, or if you're riding them in a situation where you don't have to worry about that, then hey, stiff rubber could be a pro. Like I said, makes it stronger, makes it more resilient to cuts from sharp rocks and that sort of thing. So I'm listing it as a con because I like that peace of mind to be able to change the tire, but hey, that's my opinion. And my next con, and again, this isn't really a con, this is more of the limitation of the tire, and that is in loose gravel at higher speeds, I was finding my rear tire was breaking loose, and when it broke loose, it was very hard to get it to re-grip. Is that a word? We're going with it. I had a hard time getting it to re-grip in the asphalt, or in the gravel, excuse me. I found I had to roll off the throttle, get my weight back over the rear tire to get it to catch again. But again, that's more of a limitation than a con. I hit the maximum speed I can comfortably hit in soft gravel on these tires. All I had to do was slow down, and they were perfectly fine. But doing 100 kilometers or so on that soft gravel on the Inuvik-Tutayaktuk highway, yeah, they were breaking free a little bit. Whereas Damien and Ian, who had more off-road oriented aggressive knobbies, they didn't have that issue. So I just had to face facts that I couldn't keep up with them and just slow down a bit, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. It was totally fine. But yeah, if you are looking for higher speeds in dirt and gravel, maybe a knobbier tire would be more up your alley. But again, in terms of an all-around tire, I think these handled pretty well. So that's it for the pros and cons. Not any real cons to speak of. But yeah, overall, I would say these are an excellent tire. I would definitely get them again, especially for the type of riding that I do, which is mainly, it's a lot of highway and asphalt riding, especially here in southern Ontario, with the occasional trail and like gravel fire road. So these are great for that type of stuff. And I would absolutely recommend them for a trip like the Dempster Highway trip, where again, it's a lot of asphalt and then it ends with a big gravel road section. So these are great for that, especially if you don't want to have to switch out highway tires for dirt tires partway through your trip. You can do both on these quite comfortably. However, I would say if you are doing more trail riding or more aggressive off-road riding, there are likely better options with more aggressive knobs. just to make you feel a little more comfortable in that. Now, I wanted to film this review now because we are replacing these with something a little more aggressive for off-road, because we have started planning our next big trip, and there's going to be a lot of trail riding on that. I can't get into too many details about that yet, but there's going to be a lot of trail riding on that trip, and I'm going to have to do a lot of trail riding to practice and get ready for that trip. So I will be switching these out for a more aggressive off-road tire for those purposes, but after that trip I'll probably be going back to these because I like them so much. They're great. So that is it for me and for this review. I hope you found it helpful. If you have any questions, please let us know in the comments, and stay tuned for our trip announcement, which will be happening sometime in the future. But until that time, thanks so much for watching, everybody. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please give us a like and subscribe. It helps us out a lot, and we will see you next time.